how can we say things? How can we use our voices for Good morning and welcome to today's episode of Recipe for Success. If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Nancy Giacalone. I am an insurance consultant in the employee benefits arena. But the reason for this particular podcast is I love to cook. And a few years ago, I was whipping something up, can't even remember what it was specifically. And I started thinking about the fact that every really great dish has a very key ingredient that is critical to its success. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that that's true in life and business as well. So we're always looking for each person's recipe for success. And today I'm really excited to introduce Randi-Sue Deckard to you today. We have connected through LinkedIn, chatted back and forth a few times, and I thought, she's someone that we need to talk to. And in particular, something she posted a couple weeks ago that caught my attention, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But before we do, I would love for Randi to introduce herself to everyone. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're doing today.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on this show. And I'm a Canadian and lived in the States longer than Canada and finally became a U.S. citizen. So fun fact for everyone.
Congratulations.
I know. I'm a trained clinical scientist. I actually did research at a university and was in that area for a while. And I had the opportunity to transition to the commercial side of healthcare. And that's where I've been for the last 15 years as an individual contributor and in leadership roles. And I currently am a go-to market leader over sales, marketing, customer success for a healthcare finance firm. And we have professional services as well as software. And the easiest way I explain what I do is that we help hospitals keep their doors open by finding dollars for them. And so even if you aren't in my space, I think everyone understands that.
Absolutely. I think it's a really interesting transition to go from a clinical science role into a customer facing sales type of a role. How did that happen for you?
So another fun fact, I thought I wanted to be a forensic pathologist, and my degree from Canada includes a pathology assistant. So after having 100 autopsies under my belt and kind of, proceeding in that direction, I had a pathology mentor going like, what are you doing? You are so good at simplifying complex topics, engaging with people, and teaching, mentoring. Are you sure that you don't want to be more on the commercial side of healthcare? And he really planted that in my head, and I pivoted. And I had an opportunity to join a startup as an individual, contributor, and I don't regret it. It was a step down in title and pay that first year, but I learned so much. And after a year, they asked me to lead a team because they're like, well, if you can do this and have this type of success, can you teach a team? And I was like, absolutely. And one of the things that benefited me in medicine and science, you document everything. So as I was building my team, I had all my playbooks, everything that worked, that didn't work. I actually had something to start with. It wasn't just like, oh crap, now I have to get this done. It was already created. And I actually look at that's the reason for part of my success in go-to-market sales and being client-facing is some of the detail around processes, writing down, looking for patterns, because that's what you do in science. And of course, you experiment. But in go-to-market, we talk about iteration, right? Marketing, A/B testing. Sales, which lever do I pull to get there faster?
It's no different.
No, it really isn't.
It's really no different.
So I just experiment in a different way. Although people don't maybe like the word experiment because it sounds a little loosey-goosey, but it really is an iterative process. And that's what I do is I look at data, context of business unit economics, everything that's going on, and what is the one lever that I think if I pull will move the needle in the right direction, and just keep doing that over and over. And that's really what experimenting is.
I don't think there's anything wrong with the term experimenting because if you think about it, I mean, I use it in cooking. I remember when I wanted to make a potato sourdough bread, I'm like, I can't find a recipe I like. And
Yeah.
so I kept taking bits and pieces from other ones and I would make it. I'd make my notes and I'm like, okay, I didn't like this. I'd scratch it off and keep going until I got there, which is, that's in the kitchen. It's harmless unless somebody doesn't like it. But pretty harmless, but we do the same thing in all areas of our life. We continually test and refine and adapt. And that's all experimenting really is.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think really helps, being a trained scientist, we were trained to fail. Like
Yes.
literally, that is part of, and so that's the other thing that makes me a really good go-to market leader is I just have a different mindset. It's all about failing forward. What did I
Hmm.
learn? And how can I move the needle in the right direction? And so it's never, in my mind, it's never been about failing. It's like, how can I move forward? And
Hmm.
that mindset shift, I think, makes a huge difference, especially when you're, selling or leading a team who's selling. You Mindset is key, right? And if you can change that and how you perceive what you're doing, I think it makes all the difference for your resilience and adaptability, and what you have to do.
I think that you're 100% spot on there. And I hope any of you sales professionals that are either listening now or listening on the record that you really take that to heart because I think that's the biggest thing that holds most people back is the fear of
Hmm.
failure instead of
Hmm.
embracing failure as part of the process.
Yeah, and yeah, it's like embrace change and the iteration. Nothing stays the same, right? Just because you had success doing something before doesn't mean it's going to work again. What does the data say? What is the feedback you're getting from your customer? What are the business unit economics saying? Like you can't look at data in a silo. You have to really understand the business. But if you can put all those things together and iterate, you literally are going to pull one or two of the right choices, 95% of the time. And you literally fail forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we originally connected, and I mean, I think we did this back in October, November when we had originally scheduled this, and the original topic was going to be women in sales and leadership, which I love that topic. But
Hmm.
you posted something last week that caught my attention, and I'm like, I feel like we need to talk about this. It's very timely. And really, the post was about post conference follow up fumbles. It was I think it was something to that effect. But for those of us in sales industries, we tend to have a cycle of conferences, particularly in the healthcare industry, employee benefits, and we're just ramping up into conference season right now. I've been to my
Yep.
first one this year. I didn't go to one of them, so I could have been to two or three by now. But we meet all these people, but what do we not do?
Follow up. Follow up appropriately.
Thank you for that clarification because I think that is even more pertinent to this conversation. So let's talk about you meet somebody at a conference and you
Mhm.
think, I want to get to know that person more for whatever reason. Maybe it's a vendor, maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a
Mhm.
potential client. How do you approach that?
So, one of the things that, once again, I think the scientist mindset is this insatiable curiosity. And, I've heard other people frame it more succinctly, with regards to relationship building. And it's really about being interested in someone versus being interesting. I have a lot of great stories, tidbits, but when I meet someone, I genuinely, authentically really want to know, what they're interested in. And I think, especially depending on the setting in a conference, sometimes they have like networking happy hours, if I can just use that as an example. That's not the place that you like spew what you do and, pitch them that's too early, right? You really want to get to know them as a person, find out, what makes them tick, what, is interesting to them. And, throughout that, you can't help that, professional things will come out. But if you lead with really getting to know them as a person first and finding out, what they're trying to, accomplish. And sometimes it can be like simple questions like, hey, what do you hope to get out of this conference? Or who do you want to meet? Who's the one person if you could meet? Because maybe you can facilitate an introduction, right? And so I always look at relationship building as, being curious and genuinely curious, and then also being authentically how you can help them and add value. And if you start the relationship that way, authentically, transparently, and with integrity, I think that makes a huge difference. And I think some people get it wrong because they are either nervous or they they don't know what to say, so they fall back on, oh, if their pitch deck or whatever the case may be. And that just kind of turns people off. You wouldn't walk up to a complete stranger and try and sell them your car, right? You you would, maybe comment on something, where you're standing in front of, oh, did you stop here because it smells good at the bakery? Whatever. So I think it's really about being genuine in the moment. And I think people react to that.
Well, I agree with you 100%. I also find that a lot of salespeople aren't really listening well. They're just
Oh my
waiting for their
gosh.
turn. They're just waiting for their turn to talk.
Yes. And so that is a key trait that I think is so important. And it's something everyone can learn, right? Some people are better listeners, but it is something that everyone can learn, but it does take practice. And it's not just active listening, really seeking to understand, but it's also observing body language. Do people leaning in, leaning out? Are they looking for the exit? Or, oh, sorry, I got to go. Reading the cues. We've all been there, right? And so that's the other thing when you're first meeting someone new, not hogging their time. Maybe the conversation is going, but you want to give them the opportunity to, step away or break away without it feeling awkward. And like I said, if you can, you know, depending where it is in the conversation, if you can really take those moments when they come up and say, "Oh, I see so and so. Do you know them? Is this someone that you want to meet?" Or, something to break, because I think it's another thing is that I've been at conferences and I can literally see, the big eyes, and they're literally, you can see them scanning because they're trying to get out of a conversation. That deer in the headlight look.
Been there, done
And
that.
I know, and and I'm thinking, how can the other person be so oblivious that they don't see that, right? And then the other thing is be welcoming. Like, how many times have you walked into a conference that maybe you're a regular of, and you've seen someone maybe standing awkwardly, or, you know, you just know that this is maybe their first time, or they don't know what to do, you know, welcome. Hey, is this your first? Just start the conversation. Make people feel comfortable, and that can be a big help as well. And people remember that. People remember how you treat them. People remember if you really listen to them. And part of my follow up is, especially at a conference where there's a large amount of people that I've met, I'll use my phone and make little voice notes as soon as I can so I don't forget. During a conference, maybe when I'm in a session, I'll take notes of who I've met and what I want to, remember and follow up on. But the voice notes really help me. And I always try to, within a short period of time, when I say short period, 24 to 48 hours, just do a quick follow up. And when I say quick follow up, it's not necessarily about adding value, but it's a cementing who I am and the conversation that we had. If there was something funny said or they mentioned something personal, bringing that and whatever the call to action is, like follow up, whether it was an introduction, information, whatever the case may be, I'll mention it and I'll say, I'll get back once you get settled, right? And that gives me a reason to follow up. And it's always about adding value. And there are so many ways that we can add value that just aren't business, right? Um, and it's if you've listened and been curious, those things will come up. Sometimes it could be as simple as a restaurant recommendation, daycare, you name it, the gamut. Just really think about how you can add value. And that's what people really want. Is people they want people to know them, understand them, and help them.
And I liked what you were saying before, because I think that to boil it down, people remember how you make them feel.
Yes.
And if you make them feel uncomfortable, they're not going to really be
Mhm.
excited to talk to you again. If you
No.
make them feel comfortable and welcomed and safe, they
Mhm.
are going to be more open to having that next conversation. What did really
Absolutely. And that's really what, the relationship building those first are. It's how do you start and then how do you keep the conversation going where you're adding value for that person. And if you keep showing up authentically and helping them, um, they will generally continue the conversation. And sometimes you just have to realize in business, the timing is not right. But if you view this as a short game, oh, well, I can't get anything from them right now, you're wasting that opportunity to build that relationship. I've had back and forth conversations with over a year or even longer before any business has occurred. But they've referred me or done other things in the meantime. While I'm adding value to them, they're still adding value to me. So it really is a long-term game, and you never want to ruin a relationship because you just never know in the future where that person might be, who they might know, and how that might all be connected. And your reputation and your word is everything.
do what you say you're going to do. It's as simple as
Yes,
that.
it
um,
really is. It really is. But a lot of people just don't follow up and then they don't nurture. They think, oh, I can't get business right now. And they'll like drop them like a hot potato, which is the wrong thing to do. That's the time to really nurture and see how you can help that person professionally and personally to continue the conversation with them, regardless of whether you're going to get immediate business.
so I love your tip about taking a voice note. I've never
Mhm.
done that before, but that is actually brilliant, because I spend more time trying to correct my autocorrect and all of that on my notes. I'm
And
going,
I,
what was I actually saying to myself
oh,
here?
I'm all thumbs, literally
Yeah,
trying to like
yeah.
text and make notes. And so, yeah, for me, a voice note is so much easier to do. And there are, you know, I have an iPhone. It has like the little voice memo. I
Yes.
don't use anything fancy, but then it's something I can go back to, and I'll attach that voice note to like the contact that I create. So I kind of always have that, and then I keep building. Back in the day, people had Rolodexes, right? But if you saw my contact in the phone, like I use the note section and I drop things in there all the time as I'm learning. And I also approach relationship building kind of like as a system. It's like, who do I need to reach out to this month? Who was someone that I need to follow up with, and really getting into a cadence of always, who should I be reaching out to next? And, never letting someone go longer than, for me, months at a time, like never more than 3 to 6 months, always trying to stay present, but adding value to them in some way, shape, or form, I think is super key.
I love that tip about using the notes section of contacts. I do that on
Mhm.
appointments all the time, but I've never done it on notes. Other than
Right.
sometimes I'll make just some general note, like a key code to somebody's gate or something. But what a great idea and a place to store that type of information and then to continue to build on it so you have some history and context around that person. I think that's a really great tip.
Yeah, and the nice thing about your doing it on your phone is, I've had the same mobile phone number for years. Um, and, you know, through my different journeys in healthcare from life sciences to tech and, finance, I have all these contacts, but, I have just a wealth of information and, you know, including, companies they've worked at or things they've mentioned. And it's a refresher for me. I can't keep it all in my head. There was a statistic somewhere that someone said the most that you can keep from a relationship building was like, I don't know, it was like 60 to 100. And after that, you start kind of losing it. And if you think about over your career, how many people you meet, how do you stay organized, right? And that's just one way that I think is super helpful because most people, A, have a phone, and most people are, that's an underutilized area. And it's just super easy to put it in there. And if you change phones, change companies, that information just it's in the cloud, it comes with you, which
Yep.
is awesome. You don't lose it.
I'm wondering because now that you've mentioned it, I'm like, this is such a great idea. I'm going to immediately start implementing this. But I'm wondering if there's a way to like tag your contacts, like give them different categories, like vendor, HR, prospect, because that would be super helpful too. Because sometimes you forget, like, what was that
Right.
person's name? And then if you could search for, I bet you can. Okay, I'm going to have to look into that one
Sure.
later.
So one of the things I do, just so if I can tease that out. So, normally, it's like their first last name and then like
Right.
title, like company or whatever. So
Hmm.
that's what I put in there. It's like, because I've been in different industries, so I know everything from pathologists to
Sure.
CFOs in healthcare, right? But I'll make a note, pathologist oncology or pathologist surgical, whatever, or CFO, what size of hospital, whatever the case may be. So that's kind of how I
So do you like put it after
categorize.
their last name as like a little note?
Yeah,
Okay, that's
exactly,
a
and
good idea.
then when you go to search, it
Yes.
helps, right?
Yeah.
And I'm in communities like, paid communities like Pavilion, and I also put fellow Pavilion member, what
Sure.
chapter they're in, just as a reminder, right? Yes, I can go to LinkedIn, but this is my notes on that person, so it's a little bit more
I
than
I feel
LinkedIn.
like sometimes it's our brain.
It really is, and the older I get, I need a little help, and so it's all about being uber organized and, whatever I can do to capture that up front, everything from kids' names to dogs' names to spouse names to where they like to vacation, eat. It just like I said, "Oh, last time we talked, you mentioned this." People love that, it's not that I have a super memory, I've just learned some tricks to help me along the way.
Well, it tells people that you see them, and
Mhm.
and people want that. They wanna be seen and heard and valued and by some another person noticing those little things and then commenting back, they can feel that. And again, that goes back to how you make them feel. So I think that's a
Yep.
fantastic suggestion. Okay, so we've got the notes. We've probably created a contact of some sort. What's your next move?
So, like I said, within that 24 to 48 hours, I do that message to cement. And depending on how we've connected, some people will, hey, best way to contact me is text message or, shoot an email or it's okay on LinkedIn. Like I always try throughout the conversation to figure that out. Naturally, of course, but tease that out. And like I said, in that 24 to 40 hours, drop a message and that is to cement in their mind who I am and the conversation we had. So whatever kind of key things we talked about, I will, it's very brief. It is not, super heavy in anything other than to cement in their mind the conversation we had so they don't forget me. Think about how many times you go to a conference and all the different people you meet and people reach out to you and you're like racking your brain. Did I meet this person? Did I talk to this person? So, I literally do that, whether it's the next morning, following morning when I'm doing my coffee, whatever. I literally go through and create those little follow-up messages. Then within a week or two of the conference, that's when I'm doing my critical follow-up, whatever we talked about, how I can really help them. So that's more thoughtful. And the reason I wait a little bit is people are getting back from a conference, they're catching up on work. I've already had one interaction with them. I'm following up on that. So they still have that, oh yeah, this is that person cemented, and but then here's like the real deal follow up. And within the first month, I also make sure I send a handwritten note. Now, one of the things that has been a challenge in my industry is, prior to COVID, I knew if I sent it to, administrative at the hospital, it would get to them. Now, a lot of people are working from home, hybrid, but once again, throughout conversation, you find that out. So obviously, if they're working from home and I know they go into the office a few times, I know that they will eventually get that. But you'd be surprised at how many times people comment just because one, they've gotten a handwritten note that's thoughtful, and it really cements you in their brain. And at the end of the year when I do my Christmas cards, I'm embarrassed to say how many cards I send out. But when I send those out, it's also something thoughtful and personalized, for our clients, my contacts. Like, it's a lot. I start Don't Laugh in October, creating those notes. I
You're
know.
very, you're very organized. That's such a bad time of year for me. I actually love sending and receiving Christmas cards, although I've gotten really out of the habit just because it's such a difficult time of the year for me. I think that those are wonderful suggestions. One thing I have done a few times, I'm not very organized about it like you are, but that I have been found helpful is particularly from a conference. Sometimes I'll grab a screen, I'll take a picture of something that's happened on the screen, and I'll ask somebody, for their contact information. I'm like, hey, I wanted to send you this. And I'll say, I don't know if you were in this session, but I found this really useful. That's it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's a great way, again, to tie at the conference, to have that initial contact. It's not invading anybody's privacy. So I think that's, oh yeah, just a comment from Judy says, always put a little note in. Yeah, I think that's wonderful because, again, Christmas cards have gotten very automated, and they don't even have any handwriting on them.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's cool, but I miss somebody just signing their name was meaningful to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I start early, and, I was one of those weird kids that loved, penmanship in school. And, I love calligraphy. So like I literally, I have different color inks. And so it's a process for me. But I love it. And
That's awesome.
It's just one of those things that's a little bit extra that people enjoy, and there's always something thoughtful in it. And I love what you shared about, at a conference taking, the screenshot of something that happened. And, at a conference, you're right, there are a lot of different session tracks, and that is a great way. And even if someone's speaking that I want to connect with, lots of times they're bombarded, at the end. And that's a great way to connect with them is, hey, I don't know if anyone sent you pictures, but here's a few pictures for you, loved XYZ. But I don't like bombard them as soon as they talk. They're probably like, they got all these things going through their mind. That's not the time to catch up with them, right? But yeah, that's a great idea. I love it.
Okay, so now we've sent an actual critical follow-up, and then you want now they're showing some interest. You feel like something, things are going in the right direction. How do you transition from just building a relationship to actually having a sales conversation?
Right. The way that I do that is, looking for this, what I call the signals, right? And I think the worst thing you can do is force someone who isn't ready yet. So it's about being looking for the signals that they're ready to have that conversation. And I can do things that can gauge their interest, through, oh, you mentioned that you were doing this in your organization. Here is here's an article, or a piece of collateral, or hey, we had this on our webinar or podcast. Would love to know your thoughts. See if you can engage them. And if they're actually interested in that, then that will help move the conversation forward. Um, so I'm always finding ways to, like I said, gauge those signals. And I wish I could say it's a one size fit all, but it's not. It really
Right.
depends on the person. And I think that that is one of the things that, um, you know, as a leader, I want my team to have a framework and a process, but I also have to give them flexibility to adapt to individual people that they're dealing with, because no two people are the same in how they react to an email or outreach, a phone call. So you have to be able to read those signals. So what I've given my team and myself is a framework. Here are all the different signals that you can look for, and here are the different ways you can test the signal without pushing someone away, and still always adding value. I always talk about, what's your bank account? Do you have more money in the bank with them from a relationship standpoint before you ask for something, or would make a withdrawal? I'm always asking, what is your status of your bank account? So we always talk about what deposits we've made, and that's to remind ourselves about how we need to add value to that person so they want to continue the conversation with us.
That is a great way to look at things. I can just tell from the way you're talking, you're a phenomenal sales leader. I love the way that you're engaging your team, you're educating them, you're helping them understand the cues and the signals, and for them not to be afraid to, as you call it, experiment a little bit. Try, if this seems like a good way with this person, go ahead and give it a try. You won't know unless you try it. It may not work with the next person, but you kind of have to trust yourself a little bit. Speaking of that, let's circle back for just a second to women in sales.
Sure.
In my experience, and I'd love to hear yours because it may be completely different, women tend to be a little bit better listeners, and they tend to be a little bit more responsive to the cues as you've described them. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's kind of interesting. I have seen mixed. When I say mixed, I've had teams where I've had some of the women actually better at active listening and observing the cues. And I think when I've seen it in the women, more in women, it also comes out from a sense of empathy, that they're curious about that person and really wanting to hear that person, and so they emphasize, or they're empathetic. And the one thing that is also interesting is that if you and I are having a conversation as women, we will nod. Nodding just means I hear you. It doesn't mean I agree with you.
I can't even stop doing it.
Exactly. But a man will nod when they agree with something. And so I think this is a tricky question, because it's how you interpret. Like, when I'm with a man, I am very cognizant of, I should not nod my head. I need to verbally say, I agree. And it's really hard. It's really hard for me, as one of the things that I've learned. And so I think that you really have to observe who's in the room, and what you're seeing, is that actually accurate? Because it's all about perception, how that other person views it, right? And so, and I bring that point up about men and nodding and women and nodding, because it's the one thing that I've seen over and over again, women nodding in a meeting, and I'm like, okay, we're all women, that's okay. If there's a man in here, we need to stop that, because they're going to see it as agreement.
That is fascinating. I didn't know that. At all.
Yep.
I'm going to have to have big...
Psychology, I think, is, one of the most underrated skills in sales, and psychology is so important. One of my best bosses was actually trained as a clinical psychologist, and I think that he was so good at managing people because of that, because he really understood human psychology. But there's also sales psychology as well, right? So I think women in general, because they're empathetic and they tend to be more observant, sometimes people take that as, they're not actively listening, because they're maybe not participating as much, but observing and active listening go hand in hand. And sometimes it's just not the right moment for them to speak up, or they feel it's not the right moment. But I think there is a difference.
Fascinating. Okay, before we get into our last section, I want to touch on, there's been a real rise in popularity of sending gifts for the sake of sending gifts. Now, I am a gift giver, I am a gift sender, but I don't do it in the way that it's being utilized in sales right now. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, being in healthcare, this might not be popular with our audience, but most of our contracts with customers say no gifting, or they have a limit like of $25 over a year. Like and some of my customers are like, you can't even buy me a cup of coffee because I don't want to have to report anything to our compliance department. So I think that thoughtful gifting is awesome. I'd love to gift, but it's more personal than business. For example, someone's having a baby. I love to quilt. I will quilt a blanket for them and send it. But in our actual business, we just don't do it. And I think I have to create value in order to earn the right to their time. I can't buy it with a gift. At a conference, yes, if we have a booth, I might have a giveaway, but people are dropping their name in for that. That's not the same as, oh, I want to speak with Nancy. Hey, Nancy, I can, send you a $50 gift card or whatever the case may be in order to meet with you, right? Yeah. So I know that's not as popular, and I've talked to the gifting companies and I understand how they're using it, but I think for people like us in our industry, having to earn the right, you truly have to have those skills. You can't buy it. You have to earn it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I tend to gift when I know that there's, like you say, there's an occasion, there's somebody sick, there's a baby, there's maybe a death, things where I want somebody to know I'm thinking about you. That's it.
Absolutely.
I'm not asking for anything from you. I'm simply thinking about you.
100%. And like I said, I think for those of us who, have been in an industry, whether it's finance or healthcare, where it's heavily regulated, and you have had to earn the right, you're actually a better seller because you don't rely on things like that. You literally have to earn the right to their time.
Yeah, I agree. Well, this has been eye-opening, I hope, for everybody besides me, because I've been taking some good notes. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this myself so I can get all my takeaways out of it. But we have made it to the fun part of the show where you get your 5 burning questions that no one ever gets to avoid. So, number 1, what is your absolute favorite food in the world, and can you cook it?
So my absolute favorite is dark chocolate, which no, I can't prepare. But if I had to prepare something, it would be sea bass. And yes, I grill it. I have an amazing recipe, and it's my fave.
It sounds delicious. I'm assuming there's no chocolate in the sea bass recipe.
No. But like I said,
just for clarification purposes.
Just for clarification, but I do the darker the chocolate, the better. And just one square, it makes me so happy.
With a little salt. I like the salty dark chocolate.
Yes, it's awesome.
Okay, so what's the characteristic or personality trait that you admire most in other people, and why?
Patience. So I am not a patient person, but I have learned by having systems and processes and frameworks, it slows me down. But I really admire people who are patient because I am not a patient person. I really have to temper myself. I'm just like, let's just go.
So now I'm going to turn the mirror on you and I'm going to ask you, what's the characteristic in yourself that you're most proud of and why? Because we know it's not patience. So
Yeah, I would say adaptability. I have transformed multiple times throughout my professional career. And I think adaptability and resiliency are the two things that I am most proud of, 100%.
I love it. Those are great answers. What's the one thing that everyone should do immediately after meeting somebody they want to connect with?
Follow up. Seriously, make that voice note so you don't forget the details, because really, if you've actively listened, the devil is in the details. And be your authentic self. Like I take my job seriously, but I don't take myself seriously. Anyone who meets me, I think the biggest compliment I get is, "Oh, you're just, you're in person, and how you're the same person." My emails are the same way. So there's usually a little bit of humor, something funny we talked about, because that's who I am. And so yeah, just make sure you get the details and then follow up. Don't fumble it.
Great advice. So, what is your secret talent or something people would be surprised to learn about you?
A lot of people are surprised how creative I am, being a scientist. So in my spare time, I love to quilt, fuse glass, silversmith. Uh, Absolutely love, letting my inner artist out. In fact, I created that.
Amazing. It's amazing.
so,
Well, you mentioned the
so
calligraphy, so I'm like, I was thinking it might be along the artistic lines.
yeah, but a lot of people are surprised because of how nerdy I am, like the scientists and data, but that how much I love that creative aspect. And once again, I think that makes a big difference because that does bleed into my professional life as well, about how I approach things, that creative aspect, a little bit of art and science together.
I love it. Okay, last question, and we've made it to the end. Who's the one person, famous or otherwise, living or dead, that you would most love to sit down, have a cup of coffee, and a conversation with?
My grandmother, she passed when I was 30, and she got to meet my daughter at 8 months old. But if I could bring her back, I would. She helped raise me. She was one of my strengths growing up. She was a force of a woman, and I would just love to sit down and show her, look where I am, Grandma. And that would be awesome.
That's beautiful, Randy. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm sure that we could have gone for much longer because there's a lot to be talked about, the sales process, building relationships. So I hope that any of you that tuned in late or are catching this on rewind, please listen, because there are just nuggets and nuggets of gold that Randy dropped on us all today. So take notes, try it out, experiment with it, see what works for you, and create a system, and you'll start to see differences in your relationships and ultimately probably in your sales as well. So thank you again, Randy. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn.
Okay. And you can find Randy on LinkedIn as Randi-Sue Deckard. And
Yes.
she is linked on here as well, so you can connect with her. So thanks again, Randy. This has been wonderful. Thank you, everyone else, for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.